Hi, welcome to Digital Badge Academy's webcast. I'm your host, Jim Daniels, here along with fellow host David Leeser, who's going to kick off today's session with our special guest.
Yeah, thanks, Jim, and thanks for joining us, Tim Riches and Omid Mufeed from Navigatr. And they're going to talk a little bit about their platform. They have a digital badge platform, where they think the industry is going. They're also going to show us a little bit about how AI is starting to get infused into digital badge platforms and what the benefits are to you. So welcome, Tim and Omid.
Hi, thanks for having us. Yeah, and it's great to connect with you actually, and especially with people that have been working in the industry for 10 plus years now. And I don't know about you guys, it'd be interesting to know what you thought, but it feels like there's sort of real momentum sort of kicking back into the digital badging world again. And we still use the IBM case study when we're explaining and pitching badging to people. And so that's been amazing to draw up on many occasions. And it's great to see the work you're doing with Digital Badge Academy. I feel like it's really valuable, and delighted to be here to share some thoughts and learn with you.
And it's interesting you say that because we've always felt that this was at least a 10-year journey to get this moving. It's kind of like the shift from analog to digital and the move from film to digital cameras. But I think that the idea of the whole skills-based economy and the skills-based talent, um, everything from skills-based hiring to talent management, I think is going to be dependent on the kind of work you guys are doing. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. Omid, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, definitely. And throughout the journey that we've built, we've built several different badging platforms, and all the way from badges for primary school students to badges for master chefs. And all along the way, the one question that we would receive was, so how is this badge going to help me progress in my life, help me get into a job, or help me get into university? And that's the main thing that we wanted to solve when we came together to form Navigatr. And the backbone of that is to have a common language of how you recognize skills. Skills are the glue between how you connect experiences, how you connect knowledge, and how you connect it to opportunity. And, um, and it's very every organization defines skills in different ways. And at the beginning, we started coming up with our own skills framework, but we soon realized that it is a bigger job. You might get it right for a certain industry, but once you expand it across, it is very difficult. And skills are changing all the time, especially in the day and age that we are in. Every 6 months, there are new skills emerging and some older skills becoming irrelevant. So that's why we started taking advantage of big data and AI, and seeing how we can use these innovative technologies to disrupt the traditional ways of recognizing skills, and being able to connect every little experience, every little piece of knowledge to big opportunities, such as getting into a job, or getting part qualification for a university.
Yeah, I think a lot of things that you all have just said really hit home, right? There has been somewhat of a new surge, or more of a recent surge in the popularity, or at least the recognition of the important role that digital credentialing can really have, right, for a business, or maybe it's even a higher education institution. Having sat in that seat where I've been responsible operationally for a really large enterprise level global credentialing program, and also in a consulting role, helping others come up with that. I saw that initial surge, when I got involved in credentialing back in early 2015. And then we saw it mature on some levels and kind of level out. But I think, now with the whole, just like was said earlier, with the skills-based economy really starting to rise and become something that folks are paying a lot more attention to, as well as the role of AI and technology and all sorts of disciplines. It's really starting to take off again in some new and interesting ways.
I wondered, just sort of backing up just one bit, Jim, just thinking about, so I've been thinking about the sort of conditions for growth at the moment and why things feel a little bit differently, sort of building on what you were saying. And I was thinking, it feels like there's much more awareness and adoption of credentials now. So when we
Agreed.
started, there was a lot of kind of jazz hands, weren't there? And there was this new technology and, why don't you try it? And people say, well, who else is using it? And people would get onto Google and they would look and it was an experimental project, and it doesn't feel like that anymore. So it feels like we've got a kind of general awareness and adoption going on. And then I think the other thing is, and this is what we wanted to do with Navigatr, kind of the technology just seems a lot more accessible now. So, I mean, we're going to get on to talking about AI and badge writing, but it just seems it's so much simpler now and there's so much technology that can help you in terms of accessing big data, but not having to get technical about it, to be able to extract skills really easy from educational programs, for example, which, in the past are just like a really huge job to do, and you have to have lots of expertise and knowledge. And then the third thing for us, and I'm not sure if it's the same, I think it's a kind of similar condition for you guys in the States, is that there's a real tightening of the labour market at the moment. So it seems to be easier to talk to people in, whether they're educators or employers, about this when there's a real need to look at different kind of skills-based hiring approaches. So that's what we've just found really encouraging at the moment in terms of the conditions for growth. So I just thought it worth just sharing that.
People are starting to trust them now, right? I mean, there's been enough social proof, there have been enough evidence that and then now they're finally doing studies. In fact, when we got into this early on, in the earliest days, that was our original, our point of view, developing the IBM program, was that if we don't provide evidence that this is actually better than the alternatives, then why bother? And so we were very careful to make sure that we cataloged and measured the benefits that it would have on it. And we found that it increased sales at IBM. Our sellers were doing better than earned badges. It increased retention at IBM. There were a number of different factors that it absolutely did. And I think now that there's been enough social proof, and like you said, I think that we probably hit that diffusion of innovation point in the curve where we've crossed over the early adopters and the influencers, and we're now into we're probably into the early adopters really at this point. We're do the late adopters and laggards maybe a little later, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it feels like there is still some blockers out there as well. Maybe in terms of badge governance and people being able to sort of differentiate between which credentials they can trust, which are high stakes and which are low stakes, but also perhaps some challenges in terms of connecting tech stacks together so that credentials can move between different types of platforms and different sectors, between education and, into application tracking systems. And I mean, something struck me the last time we met, David, and you were talking about the need as well, just to keep on making sure that you explain the value proposition really clearly to the different groups. And when you introduce badging, perhaps the one thing not to do is talk about badging first, but to talk about their actual needs. So there's still kind of more refinement going on, I think, around that communication side as well.
Yeah, there's definitely still a bit of opposition, still some skepticism and concerns. What I run into a lot is folks who are concerned that if they introduce badging, will it somehow degrade, like if they have a certification program, for instance, how does badging work in the context of an organization that has certification programs? David, you and I ran into this at IBM, and I've been speaking with a client just recently that has the exact same concern. And of course, because of our experience, we know that if done correctly, introducing digital credentialing with badging, and expanding what you're recognizing through digital credentialing can actually optimize and enhance these high stake programs like certification. It doesn't take away from them at all. In fact, it helps, tell a much more complete story. But it takes some convincing. Folks don't come to the table, immediately ready to accept that notion, right? They have to be talked into it, or at least shown some data and evidence of how that's happening. So we do still run into that occasionally as well ourselves.
And I was going to ask you, for Navigatr, do you focus mostly on the college or the higher education market, the corporate market, or commercial market, or the public sector? What's your major focus, or do you even have a major focus?
Where we've sort of landed is our last business, Digital Me, was acquired by City and Guilds Group, and I remember talking to Michael Osbaldeston there, who's in kind of policy and trying to persuade governments to do things in different ways. And I was asking him about, how do we get open badges really adopted nationally? And he said, well, at the moment, the government is very busy with things like Brexit. And they're just not willing to engage in a kind of new idea like this, and you'd be much better to focus on the cities. And the cities is where you can connect with people right the way across the ecosystem. So people who are in colleges, who we have been working a lot with recently, but also some of the groups that are recognizing lived experience, or project-based learning, which is formed sort of outside of formal sort of qualifications. And you can talk to the employers, and you can bring all of those groups together. So we sort of ended up working on ecosystems that have a few different players, and I guess what we're trying to bring something a little bit different to the badging market. One is the accessibility side, but one is really what Omid was saying before around the connectivity, so people can see a badge, but they can also see where it might lead to. It might lead to from informal learning to a college credit, from college credit into employment. So we tend to be sort of working across those groups at the moment, in place-based initiatives, and with people who are either kind of disenfranchised and looking for a new way to get in to learning, or people who are looking at reskilling. And it's gradually, the age range is gradually getting older as we start to sort of look at that reskilling side.
Are you finding that people are able to make the connection between digital, in a tight labor market, right? Like you had mentioned earlier, and it is the same way here in the US. But when you're having that conversation with people, are they able to connect the dots between the value that digital credentialing can bring forward with, what it means to try and look after the talent management side of things in an effective way?
Mm. I mean, I think one of the most fascinating case studies at the moment is Manchester College Group. And I was listening to your last webinar, is it John Makovich from the college, and it's not that dissimilar to that case study. What the college has been doing is they've recognised that there's a tight labour market. So actually, it's not about it's pretty much full employment. So it's around reskilling. And they've gone out to talk to employers, consulted with them, used some labour market information as well, and then co-designed the courses with employers. So there's no kind of surprise then when someone's earning a credential, and they're taking that credential to the employer, because the stakeholders have been around the table from the beginning. And some of the courses they're developing, I mean, it looks like MIT. It's a college course, but it's 16 to 19 really, but it does go into adulthood as well. But they're doing drone surveying, they're doing heat pump installation, really fascinating stuff. So they're about to start developing pathways to the local jobs now. So I'm really hopeful that that's going to work, because they've had the stakeholders around the table from the beginning. But I think that is the sort of final yard, really, is that connection between all of these programs and real job opportunities.
I was saying back to what you were saying, Omid, at the very beginning. This is all in service of getting a job, right, or getting some sort of advancement in your career. And we're finally seeing that. I think that from what I've seen, it seems like it maybe is a little more mature in the United Kingdom than it is in some other parts of the world. I know certainly more than even in the United States. And but does require a lot of coordination. And back to that whole idea of the taxonomy, there is no single taxonomy to do this, and it requires interpretation. And maybe that's where AI comes in.
Yeah, and in terms of adoption as well, some of the new markets, some of the new skills, like the ones that Tim mentioned, drone technician or drone pilot, these are skills that are new to the labor market. There aren't the traditional credentials for these. There aren't the traditional definitions of what these skills stand for, and these are the areas that is easier to start digital, because these are digital native skills, and it gets easier to start at this stage. And and most of the time it is big data or AI or technology in general just driving the definition, rather than it being a transformation stage where you transform the traditional qualifications across to technology. And that's an area that will keep changing probably. There are, in the next 5 to 10 years, the skills landscape is going to hugely change. And there will be so many new skills that our children will need to learn. They will need to be native with them. And the skills that we have, probably 50 to 60% of them will be irrelevant by the time we are retired. And it's kind of our responsibility to start mapping these skills in a way that the next generations will be able to navigate through it better. The competition in our age is going to be, it was faster than generations before, but in the future generations, that competition is going to be is going to be crazy. And so the next generations, our children, will need all the help they can to be able to gain the skills that will make them progress in their lives and will help them stay relevant. We've heard about all the concerns that are around the AI and automation taking jobs, and the new skills and the skills that will be relevant. That is a whole different conversation. But the reality of it is that change is coming, and it's our responsibility to map the way for the next generations.
Yeah, something you said there also, made me think that, skills are fluid, David, as you have said many, many times, and skills do come and go at a much more rapid rate, which I think underscores the, ever increasing need that when someone is trying to convey to someone else, what they know and what they can do, and perhaps what they've mastered, it's more important than ever that they be able to do that, not just in a verified way, but in a detailed way, which again just underscores, the importance of having something like digital credentials, which are metadata rich and can provide a whole lot more context than, say, a traditional, college transcript. So I think that makes a whole lot of sense. The example of a drone pilot. Just a quick side story. A close friend of mine that I worked with in the IT industry for years was laid off from his job, and he decided that, I'm going to go do something different. And he ended up going to work for a company that does inspections of big windmills, and they use drones to do this. And it was just a whole new thing for him. But I can remember him trying to describe his role and what they did, and it was hard to kind of get, wrap my arms around it and kind of wrap my head around that. So again, I think you're absolutely right. The skills come and go so fast that it's just hugely important that there be a way from the consumer side of credentialing to be able to look into what somebody has developed in a way of competencies and gain an understanding of that in a much easier way.
We've decided to, we looked around at a few different models for sort of extracting skills, and decided that the Lightcast taxonomy was a really good one to explore. So we've integrated that throughout the platform now, and sort of back to this point around accessibility. When you paste in a job description or a course description, that will then just automatically extract those skills for you. This is sort of before you get to the AI side. And then you can use your expertise then to, pick which of those skills are really, really relevant. I think I think that common skills language is really important. I think if you think about it from the sort of, I guess if you think about it from the individual point of view, you know, if you're getting recognized with badges that have skills in that we educators think are the right skills but aren't aligned to the labour market, that's not going to help the individual, because they need to be able to confidently express those skills when they get to an employer. You know, it really helps educators when they're designing badges as well, so they can align their program with the skills of the labour market. And it's very difficult for them to have all of those skills, you know, and that knowledge at hand. And they're really important for the employer, I think, because then when they get the badge, they're looking at skills which they're familiar with. But that sort of big data taxonomy, which was developed by Lightcast, we think is really impressive, which is why we decided to integrate it. And it's an open source one as well. And that's kind of dynamically evolving. And I mean, you guys will know, you know, with tech platforms, you can't do everything. You can't be great at everything. So integrating those different pieces of technology, I think, has been, you know, quite a key part to our strategy in terms of getting the best tools in people's hands.
Yeah, and I think that that's where the taxonomy almost has to sit in an organization. Like you said, it's the glue that connects everything from the job to be done to the description of the role that needs to happen for that, to the, you know, skills and qualifications, to the assessment of that qualification, and then of course the recognition of it as the badge. So you have all these different things along the pathway, and it seems like nobody has been able to crack the code on how to glue it all together. But ultimately, the buck stops with the badge when you think about it, because that's ultimately the registry for the company. And it's interesting, you have people like Josh Bersin now talking about the need for a skills cloud. And I really think that that's the future for digital badges, is it becomes the skills cloud. It is the place for the skills cloud, is the digital badge.
And do you mean by skills cloud, do you mean sort of where people will search for talent? Or
Yeah, I think it is. And you know, I don't want to misinterpret what he's trying to describe, but his description is based on the skills-based talent management strategy. Is how do you know what skills you have in your organization? How do you know at that micro level what skills you have? And then what are the adjacencies to other jobs? So if I know somebody has these 3 or 4 skills in customer service, well, I just need to give them 2 or 3 more skills to move them up into an IT technician. And we don't have that micro level skills cloud at an organizational level more than anything else.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And we were trying to do some similar sort of work, but around young people in Southampton, and using the Lightcast taxonomy and looking at, well, what skills are people developing in their spare time and in their work? And if you combine those 2 skill sets, could that help someone transfer into another area? So we had one case study. There's a girl called Claire. She was working in Primark, which is a kind of basic retail job, but she's learned retail skills. But in her spare time, she's putting clothes on Depop. So she's got photographic skills. She's really got e-commerce skills. And when you combine those together, you could have a pathway that then allowed that person to transfer into an e-commerce job, which is much more, you know, safe, secure, and has prospects as well. So I think that area is something that really interests us. And yeah, it's back to that common skills language again, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I was going to say, and it also requires assessment, right? Because most of the learning is unstructured learning that's done outside of the job, outside of the classroom, and all these things are not captured. And that's why tools like, you know, Minor Genius, which is being used at IBM, captures all these hidden capabilities for a person. And you know, I was talking to George Westerman. We were at a conference at ASU GSV on a panel, and he is a professor at MIT, a very well-known professor at MIT. And he told me, he said, I would never hire an MIT graduate based on that degree. I would assess them for the role, right? Yeah. Because they probably have learned things outside of that degree that are much more relevant to the practice than what they learned in college.
Yeah, I think too, and I'd be curious as to what your all's point of view is on this. So there's, you know, capturing, you know, someone's skill set, right, through digital credentialing. But then there's also the question of, well, how well developed are those skills? Are they in the early stages, mid stages, or late stages, that kind of thing? And this was something that for years now that I've spent so much time thinking about and trying to work and perfect ways to go about that. so that it's not confusing to people. How do you all deal with that aspect of it?
It's a hot topic for us at the moment, Jim. So it's something we're really thinking about a lot, and trying to sort of think about the different, I suppose thinking about badge governance. And actually, you mentioned it the other day, and it's been whirring away in our minds since then. And also sort of thinking, what's the difference between, you know, how we recognise low stakes learning and high stakes learning? And actually, you know, you want to embrace all of that learning, like you say, and like the MIT guy said, you want sort of real world experience, don't you? And I think there's a couple of things. One, on we want to be able to integrate all learning into Navigatr. I think that's kind of what needs to happen across the ecosystem as well. But in terms of low stakes learning, we think probably engagement and participation and ease of use, so you can easily enter that pathway, particularly because people might be disenfranchised from learning, or they might not have qualifications, they might be in the workplace but want to re-engage with learning. And then obviously with high stakes learning, you're probably leaning more on qualification bodies and accreditation bodies that have their processes. And, you know, some of the thinking behind the Navigatr platform is to integrate with other platforms as well. So we've integrated Credly, for example, and, you know, some of the programs they have are, you know, high stakes and kind of qualifications, because we want people to be able to see that sort of full ecosystem. But that whole badge governance side is a real key area, we think. And one piece of work we've contributed to in the UK is the RSA badging standard. And what that's attempted to do in the non-formal world and informal education is just kind of give a broad structure for types of learning and domains of learning and the types of skills you'll develop. And it's divided into 4 stages. So one is engagement, which is very, very light touch. So you just might, you know, come to a webinar on drone piloting, for example, and that's engagement, and it does say something about you. And then the next is participation, where you get involved in a course, and there's some structured course. The next is demonstrating skills in practice. So you've actually gone out there and you've done a first mapping project. And then the next stage on the final one is leadership. So that's applying your skills in different contexts, or teaching others, or things of that nature. So just trying to put a kind of structure onto learning that's happening in informal settings, and trying to get people all to adhere to that standard to add more value to learning that's happening in the informal sector.
Yeah, I think that's, you know, it's interesting you break it out like that, because I think we all run into this resistance to badge things that don't seem to be creditworthy. And and they're so necessary. Some of these capabilities, these human capabilities that wouldn't show up on a resume, they certainly don't show up in a job description, or in a college transcript, or on a resume. But then they're also, and Jim and I were talking about this, I think it was even today, we were talking about, you know, sometimes you just need a foundational knowledge. You don't have to have the skills badge. You don't have to have these deep capabilities, but you need to, like, for example, some of the large tech companies, you know, not everybody in the organization needs to know how to code or develop a cloud app, but they should have a basic foundational understanding of what cloud is and what the capabilities are for AI. And so, you know, looking at that, and we ran into this resistance, we're saying, how come we have so many people that have these basic knowledge badges and they're not progressing to the next level? Well, maybe they don't need to. Right? It needs to be based on what the job to be done is, right?
Yeah, and that just reminded me, one of the events set up is learning goals change all the time. So one thing that we built on Navigatr is pathways, so that you create your badges for different levels, and then you can start an entry level and progress to master level. And having these pathways, so that this gives a progression where you can start at a very low stage where all you do is turn up in a webinar, but that gives you a starting point, and you start building up from there. And all you have to do is at the beginning giving it an hour of your time, and then 2 hours of your time, then 1 day of your time, and then suddenly you are you have a new career path. And but that doesn't always stay like that. You don't always start at entry level to be a drone pilot, and you don't end up being a drone engineer. Halfway through that, you might change your mind and might find that you're more into maps rather than flying a drone, so you want to change your career. And the thing is that once you have those flexible pathways, all the skills you've learned are captured in your portfolio. And then we built something also called a recommendation engine, where it takes all of your existing portfolio, all of your existing skills and badges into account, and it finds alternative paths for you. And they're just small nudges in the background, and based on your preferences, you can tone them, dial them up or down. But there are things that sometimes you start a journey, something doesn't feel right, and all you have to do is a nudge from somewhere to tell you that there is another option as well. And that's the thing with, as we were talking earlier as well, the skills of future are fluid, and the platforms we build need to be fluid as well. We cannot build a platform that replicates a 2 years course, that once you're signed up, you almost you either have to finish or you have to drop out. We shouldn't, in our new platform, we shouldn't replicate those traditional structures. We should generate something that's more fluid, or it might be that the skills that you learned is going to be relevant in a completely different career, in a completely different job that hasn't invented yet. But by capturing those in that fluid structure, you will be able to apply them to new things in the future.
Yeah, I mean, you just outlined something that, to me, it gets to the core of why incremental credentialing is so important, because you may start down one pathway and you may switch to something else, because as you get further into that, your lens starts to expand and you start to see different ways you can start to apply those skills. And what you thought starting out, the direction you wanted to go in, may shift and go to another. So if you're not credentialing along the way, how do you ultimately capture those experiences and those learning activities and things of that nature? So, yeah, I think what you said is just absolutely at the core of the importance of incremental credentialing.
Hey, I want to pivot back to the question Jim asked at the very beginning.
Oh, yeah.
And that was back to, what Badge Assistant is and how you're starting to incorporate and how AI can make things easier. And Tim, you had mentioned that, things are getting easier, they're getting better, they're getting more accessible. And I think that you've done a really good job focusing on that. And maybe you could tell us a little bit about that.
I can answer that in a general sense, but we've definitely got the expert in the room here.
When the burst in AI technologies happened about 6 months ago, like every other technology provider, we started thinking about how we can apply it. And the options are so wide, and there are so many different applications that you can go with. But for us, the main thing was to be able to control the quality of the user experience, but also boost that user experience by using artificial intelligence. That was the sweet spot that we wanted to achieve with our AI technologies. And we created a roadmap of adoption of AI and seeing how that can help the user experience. And one area that was a blocker, a bottleneck for us was so organizations who did traditional qualifications or didn't do qualifications at all. For example, a mid-sized employer who was interested in training their staff, but they didn't have anything in place. For them to come on board, they had to come up with a whole new training program, then define how they want to badge those, and then roll out that program. And that normally takes about between 6 months to a year time. And that was often a blocker for organizations who came on board. And what we wanted to do was to just create shortcuts, and looked into if AI and generative AI mostly can help with that. And we built a platform called a feature called Badge Assistant, where you can ask AI in simple terms to build you a badge. Let's say we mentioned about retail skills. Build me a badge in entry-level retail skills. And then within a few seconds, you have a badge with all of the metadata in place, the title, the description, the criteria that goes with that, and then most importantly, the relevant skill tags that goes with that. And that gives you a starting point in your badge writing journey. Then you can review that draft badge. AI is not 100% accurate all the time. Sometimes it makes mistakes. So it's important to use AI for what it is. So a user, a human, should go and review that AI badge. Most of the time, it is that starting point is better than any human on average can come up with. And then sometimes it's about tweaking a sentence, adding a few skills that was missed, or removing some of the skills that somehow leaked in. And then you're ready to publish your badge. And within a few minutes, you have a badge that you can start issuing. So that condenses about several days of work, even more in some cases, into just 5 to 10 minutes. And that's that starting experience is a key. And if you can make it easier for organizations that are interested in badging but don't know where to start, then that is the thing that can help badging evolve and develop.
Sorry, would you like us to show you a quick demo with that?
That would be great.
But yeah, so I'll start off with an example, and maybe Omid will want to chip in as well. But I was just thinking about the drone pilot one whilst we were on the call. So so I put some text in for us to look at. So it's a drone pilot certified with experience of using drone technology to survey buildings, and we'll see what that comes up with. So right, so that was fast. And what it's done is it's basically looked through the Lightcast skills taxonomy, and it's done the best it can to pull out the skills that are relevant to drone piloting. So there's an easy one there. It's got drone pilot certificate, construction surveying, yes. AutoCAD, that's the, as you'll know, that is the kind of, I think that's the industry standard for built environment, you know, BIM skills. Computer aided design, yes. Construction, possibly. Consulting, yeah. So it gives you a valid driving license. I guess that's so you can drive to the site and actually get there. So that's quite a good starting point in terms of skills. We do expect though people to, you know, someone who's writing this badge will be someone who has expertise in the area. So we'll expect them to do some searching and adding to those skills. In terms of criteria, demonstrating proficiency, ability to generate accurate and comprehensive reports, yes. Experience in collaborating with construction managers. So it's not a bad start. And then, you know, one of the things I think this really helps with is when you look at you know, the metadata within a badge, there's just quite a lot of stuff to fill in if you're looking at a blank piece of paper. So just it does make it so much easier where you've got most of the fields filled in. You may need to change some elements there, change the image, obviously. And as I was saying before, there might be other things that you want to search for here. So then you can just manually, you can add more detail in the description, and the skills will be extracted from the description, or you can just manually search for skills. And sort of back to, I mean, this is kind of standard stuff in the digital badging world, but you know, what we would like to be doing here is adding endorsements. So so for example, and standards as well. And there's an organization that is doing this drone piloting badge called Copter Academy, and they do the drone piloting. So it makes sense to map against their standards and potentially get them to endorse it as well. So there's
amazed
one example.
It's back when you first typed in the criteria, so it literally created it that fast. There was not like something pre-configured ahead of time.
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised at how fast it was.
That is amazing.
Let's try something else.
Try something slower.
Yeah. What? I mean, do you want to suggest something? your sort of industry, and just see how I mean, it might be quite interesting to see sort of how it does against something you guys are familiar with.
Well, a customer service representative, for customer service representative for let's say a pharmaceutical company. And it would be entry level for customer service representative, right?
Do you say entry level?
Yeah.
Entry level. How many years experience would you say?
I would say, no experience needed.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see what happens. Never worked with technology or animals. Okay.
Very interesting, because it starts out immediately with soft skills or human skills.
How does that look from your point of view, sort of looking at the skills it's mapped in there?
Yeah, no, I mean, this is absolutely right. A person has to have communication.
Customer service, communications, professionalism, detail-oriented problems. Yeah, that's fascinating. I would expect to see those kinds of things.
They'd be the first
First.
ones, right?
Mhm.
Right. And there'd probably be some other things about patients. I know that when we were developing the customer service certificate program at IBM, we did basically a workshop, with the customer service people to figure out what the skills were. And the first thing that came up, which didn't show up here, not surprisingly, was hostage negotiation.
Right. Okay.
Because they said you have to talk people off the ledge a lot. You have to have the same kind of even, people call in and they're not too, they're pretty angry often.
Yeah, I mean, looking at this though, I mean, I can tell you from experience, I wish I had a nickel for every time I've had to help someone, an issuer, get to the point of just getting a draft set of metadata in place for something that they wanted to do. It could take, back and forth for 2 or 3, 4 days to get to that point. And then once you get to that point, then it's much easier, right? You have something in front of you. It's there's more context to it, and it really helps the thought process. But it's just getting to that point is the difficulty, and this just totally solves for that issue. Actually, more than solves for it, because I'm looking at this, and there would only be tweaking that would be necessary, which I think is part and parcel of any creation of any digital credential. Rare is the day that your first cut at creating a digital badge template set of metadata is going to be what goes into publication. But this is amazing.
People, I mean, what I'm noticing is that people kind of want to use it as well. I mean, it's a massive shift from what I mean. We've seen exactly the same thing, Jim. And I don't know if you saw the Digital Me badge design canvas we did years and years back. But it's kind of workshop when and those workshops are still necessary. Don't get me wrong. And it's really important, particularly for credential design and badge program design and badge governance. But it was a long process, and just seeing people actually going, oh, I'll just have a go actually, because I'm curious. It sort of gets people curious and interested. And then just sort of moving on one stage, and this is something that I've pre-prepared, this is really where we're trying to get to. So this college I mentioned before in Manchester, who's developed the drone piloting credential, is then to take the skills, extract the skills that are required that we've just been looking at in another context, but then start to map those to live job opportunities as well. And this is something which is just Omid's been tweaking and fine tuning this. So what we're doing is working with Lightcast, working with their data, which they've scraped from local job opportunities, but trying to get it really good in terms of a match, because often, there is quite a lot of noise in that data, but just trying to get it as closely matched as possible,
Well, this has been an excellent demo and an excellent interview today. Thank you so much for this. It's been really excellent.
Yeah,
thanks for having us.
It has. It's been really enlightening. I appreciate you showing us, kind of lifting the curtain and showing us what you're doing there. I mean, it's fascinating. What's really encouraging about it is it's awesome to see these kind of innovations starting to come around, and to address some of these sort of sticky points or pain points, things that kind of create friction when someone's trying to, run or launch or build or, manage a digital credentialing program. Having this kind of innovation in place it's a game changer. So it's, hats off to what you've created here. It's awesome.
Thank you.
And thank you for taking time out of your schedule to be with us today. We greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to talking more in the future and listening to the rest of your podcasts, which are absolutely fascinating. So yeah, that's great. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are you looking to launch a digital badging program or improve an existing one? Look no further than Digital Badge Academy. Our highly popular online masterclass will help you gain the skills and insights necessary to achieve success. Enroll now and start learning today.